Do you think there's any chance of, I mean, I see especially the US government trying to either A, ban Bitcoin, or B, try to create their own Bitcoin and make Bitcoin like illegal or something?
Every government on the planet is going to try and do both of those things to some extent or other. Some will do it in a very ham-fisted and short-sighted way. They'll try to go for an outright ban. Of course, the problem they face is this. There is no place in which Bitcoin exists. It exists everywhere on every computer that ever has participated in the Bitcoin system. So who exactly do you go after? It's not owned or controlled by any corporation or individual. There is no center to it. It's a decentralized thing. It's like saying, let's ban the web. Okay, which part of it? All of it at the same time? How? And ultimately, what Bitcoin does at its very fundamental basis is it uses mathematics to secure the distribution of money as communication, which means that as long as you can express transactions, money, in any communication medium, you can transmit it. I can take a Bitcoin transaction, I can convert it into emoji, I can post it on Twitter, and I've just transmitted a transaction. How do you know it's a transaction? You don't. It just looks like a bunch of emoji. My recipient does. They'll make sure to get that to the right place so that it works the transaction. I can take a transaction, I can embed it in the color variations of a photo of 6 kittens and post that on a Craigslist ad. Now, the other person can take that. So, bottom line, money is communication. How do you ban money when money is communication? Well, the only way you can do that is by either banning all communication, which is impossible, or imposing enormously strict penalties or fines to people who dare touch this system of money. And then you run into some other problems. In countries where the rule of law matters, banning private individuals from engaging in legitimate commercial transactions for legal purposes kind of doesn't make sense. And if you try to do it, you're going to get a lot of pushback and have to justify why you're doing it. In places where the rule of law doesn't matter, you can do that in a very ham-fisted approach, and then everybody up and down the line is going to ignore you, get bribed, probably in Bitcoin, turn a blind eye, and the game continues, because governments have never effectively banned anything, really. They try, but saying it in the law and actually making it happen on the ground, two different things, especially when what you're talking about is, for many people, the difference between feeding their family next month or not. How much risk are they willing to take? And so you get into this weird situation where what you're really talking about is banning legitimate commercial interactions between voluntary, consenting adults in open markets. You can't really do that in democratic countries without cracking down on everything. So more likely, sophisticated governments are going to try indirect approaches. The first and obvious one is propaganda. Bitcoin is only used by terrorists, criminals, pedophiles, and pornographers, as I'm sure you've heard. The problem with that narrative, of course, is every now and then you meet a hairdresser or a dentist who uses Bitcoin, and they don't look like a terrorist pornographer. So at that point, that creates some cognitive dissonance. Then you find out that refugees in Venezuela are using it to fight the regime and escape from a dictatorship. More cognitive dissonance, et cetera, et cetera. So propaganda has been the first measure. Every time they say, you know, money laundering happens through Bitcoin, and like, well, actually, it happens through Deutsche Bank and Goldman Sachs. But, you know, as you've said in your reports, where you keep catching them and doing nothing about it, these propaganda techniques are largely failing to stop Bitcoin. Another approach is to make a tangle of taxation around it, or to make it very difficult to acquire or exchange from national currency or to national currency. Of course, the problem with that is if you cut off the on-ramps and the off-ramps, people just stay in the economy. So, okay, you stop me from converting dollars into Bitcoin. So what I do is I ask to get paid in Bitcoin, and I pay other people in Bitcoin directly without converting it back to dollars. So now you've encouraged me to stay in the economy. It's kind of like if you build a wall on the southern border, the migrant workers who used to leave every season because they could come back the next season instead stay because they don't know if they can come back anymore.
Right.
There's this finicky thing called unintended consequences, and Bitcoin is a whole bundle of unintended consequences. So anyway, I think the more likely thing is governments will try to compete by building things that they pretend are kind of like Bitcoin, forms of digital currency that are managed by the Federal Reserve or other central banks. In the industry, we call these CBDCs, which stands for central bank digital currencies. They're basically a neutered, half-assed attempt to copy Bitcoin that has none of the characteristics of Bitcoin. It's not open, it's not borderless, it's not censorship resistant, it's not surveillance proof, it's not neutral to transactions, you can't join it without being vetted, etc. So it's taken away all of the interesting things. It's kind of like AOL and CompuServe tried to do with the internet. It's like, oh, you like the internet? Well, here's our version. It's proper and curated and safe and boring. And so we're going to see this is an ongoing battle. But basically what they're trying to do is stand in the way of the use of mathematics and advanced technology by consenting adults to do commercial transactions with all of the economic incentives to bypass all of these controls. That's not going to work.